All right. Josh Smith here. We're at my studio live from Flat 5. And my guest today is one of my favorite guitar players in the world and a good friend. He's coming to us live from Nashville, but he's from the Panhandle in Florida. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. He's an incredible guitar player, played with lots of great dudes, does sessions all the time. And if you're not familiar, you need to check out his work. I'll have all his links. But everybody, welcome Guthrie Trapp, man. What's happening, bro?
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for that more than deserved introduction.
No, no, dude, the first time I saw you play, I was floored. You know, I walked into Roberts, obviously, and saw you playing with Don, and man, just unbelievable playing. And, even though I'm a blues guy, I have such a big part in my heart, a soft spot for, guys that play the style that you play, even though you play everything. But man, you were just burning that night, made a fan for life. And then,
Oh,
it's been great to get to be friends and get to hang out some and do some picking. So, dude, fantastic.
man, thanks so much for saying that. And the feeling is very mutual, and I'm glad that really looking forward to this next hour or however long we're going to be on here. But man, in a way, not in a way, I feel this way is I feel like me and you were kind of cut from the same cloth. I mean, you're a fantastic country player. You're, you know, just all around good, well-rounded musician that's inspired by, I feel, a lot of different styles of music.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it has to do with, being from Florida or, how old are you, Guthrie? I'm 40.
41.
Yeah, so we're pretty much the same age. We have, I know your parents listen to a lot of music. I think your parents were musicians, mine weren't. But I don't know if,
Mine weren't, my parents were not, but my dad's youngest brother was a self-taught musician, and we were around it a lot, family and stuff. I mean, friends of the family and all that.
but I feel like both came up. I know you probably had a huge, diverse amount of music being played in your house, and
Mhm.
that was the big difference for me. My family loved everything, and not only
Yeah,
that, we listened 24 hours a day. So I was
right.
just hearing music all the time. So
Hmm.
I never differentiated between, oh yeah, okay, the first thing that grabbed me was BB King and Albert King. But it felt the same to me as when I heard the Allman Brothers, or when I heard the Rolling Stones, or then when I heard Miles Davis or Thelonious Monk or something. It was all just, man, this is great. It is all the same.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's kind of the way that I think exactly what you're saying. At 41, I've kind of at this point I go, man, it all comes down to the music. I mean, is it who said it? There's two kinds of music, good and bad. Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a pretty broad view, but it's kind of true. I mean, it either moves you or it doesn't. And I remember getting those feelings of chills and stuff when I heard certain stuff live. And when I was a kid, my parents were taking me to a lot of festivals, and there
Mhm.
was a lot of picking parties where guys would get together, and these gatherings with partying but they all revolved around music. Even if people were doing drugs and drinking,
Yeah.
it all revolved around music. It wasn't just people, flaking around. And so
Oh,
we'd go to these parties, and people would be playing bluegrass and Irish music and singing songs. And so I was around it from an early age. And I think that has a lot to do with just developing your ear and knowing what stuff is supposed to feel like as a when you're around it as a kid. Even before you put your hands on an instrument, you kind of have an idea of what this stuff is supposed to sound and kind of feel like. And the interesting thing, and then I'll stop talking for a minute, but the interesting thing and the kind of thing I'm looking back on more and more as I get a little older is I wasn't I didn't grow up playing any cover songs. I always played with songwriters and played bluegrass tunes and stuff like that, and still jammed on the electric guitar to some Allman Brothers records, and not a lot of jazz. I had one uncle that was into some jazz, but I didn't really understand it that young, and before took a while for my ear to develop into that stuff. But a lot of great songwriters: Bob Dylan, Jackson Brown, Van Morrison, and then Tony Rice, Sam Bush, Bela Fleck on the
yeah.
bluegrass side, Jerry Douglas, Mark O'Connor, all the new acoustic stuff, David Grisman, all that kind of stuff. And so, as most people would pick up the guitar and learn Beatles songs or Led Zeppelin songs or classic rock songs, I never did that. I still to this day don't know any. I don't know any cover songs. And so until I played with Don Kelly at Roberts when I was 20, sorry, with like when I was like 22, then I started playing some cover songs. But on the Gulf Coast, I was really lucky to play with songwriters, and that, for good or bad, that's how it was, you know. And so I don't know any of those riffs, and I'm not a good rock and roll player. I mean, you know, like, but that's just kind of how it was, and I'm proud of it now, you know.
Well, it's interesting because it probably helped you develop your voice much quicker because you were just always supporting somebody else and learning how to find your role in any situation, in an ensemble, in a duo, in a whatever. You had to find a role and find your own way to do it, and you weren't relying on the fact that this was a pre-existing song with a part that you needed to learn or something like that. It was good preparation for being a session musician.
It was, but and it was, but it also, I think, hurt me a little bit because I didn't become such a chameleon. You
Okay,
know,
yeah.
if I would have learned more, okay, this is this style, to be a, one of the guys that's working, like, I'm not a career session guy. I get called for some sessions on, electric guitar, acoustic, and mandolin and stuff here in Nashville, and I've been lucky to work with some amazing people. But that path has kind of always taken me. I never had a plan, really. I kind of saw out in front some people's careers that I thought would be cool to maybe emulate or end up there. But I just always wanted to play good music with good people, and I've always just gone where the work was. And so I didn't really have a plan. I just kind of, saw something kind of out in the future, distant future, and kind of ended up there, luckily. But
Yeah.
there
Well,
was never any hard, fast rules or anything like that.
Well, in that way, we're similar in that when I moved to LA, I'd never done any sessions. I'd only done my own music or original things, and so I didn't know what it took to be a session guy. And I dove in and did the research and became a much better session guitar player. But I am also not a career session guy, even though there's been years where that's where I've made my living.
Right.
The sessions that I get called for are normally people hiring me because I sound like me and not because
Exactly.
I come in and be the chameleon like you just said. Not that I
Right.
can't maybe do the job, but I don't that's not my best skill. And I think yeah, you're right, it helps us and it hurts us to some degree.
Exactly. I feel like I'm in the same boat. But that, and also some of my stubbornness of, not listening to any radio when I was growing up. I don't really enjoy commercial country music. And trust me, I understand that everybody's making a living, and man, I support it more than anything. If you can find a way to make a good living in the music business, man, I am not knocking you at all. But personal taste is the things that Nashville is known for on TV and the radio. If you don't live here and you're seeing kind of the underbelly of the guys that I feel like are the most talented people here, you're
Right.
not going to see those guys on the radio or TV. You might hear their songs or hear they're playing on some records, but the artists and the music these days, I'm not a fan of. And the reason why I don't play on those records is because I'm not good at it. I think you're going to be good at the things you really enjoy doing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so you mentioned your uncle was a musician. Did he put the guitar in your hand the first time?
Well, probably. I don't remember back then. The first thing I remember is all the music around, family and friends, and then when my uncle, I started playing with my uncle around 6 or 7 years old. I started playing the blues harmonica, right? And thank
It would
God
be
I
everybody's best friend.
yeah. And so I quickly put that down because I could only play in one key and I was terrible at it. But that was the first thing that I started doing. And so then as my uncle and his buddies would play around the house, and I would pick up their guitars when they would take a break, right?
Okay.
And so they probably took a break to go smoke some pot or something, or
Right.
refill the cooler or whatever. And I'd pick up the guitars that were sitting around and started picking out the same blues notes that I would play on the harmonica on the guitar.
Okay.
And that was kind of the first thing. And then eventually my uncle told me that, he goes, look, you found some lead stuff and some pentatonic kind of playing, but you need to learn some chords. So I never learned any chords until I was probably, closer to 9 or 10 years old or something.
Okay.
I don't know. But so there was a little electric guitar going on in the background, but a lot of it was spent playing acoustic guitar, where I learned, a lot of listening to a lot of Tony Rice stuff and a lot of straight up bluegrass. And And when I was struggling, I'd go sit in with these bands, and actually had a gig when I was 12. I played the mandolin with this band down there. Every Wednesday night we'd go out to Pensacola Beach and play at this Mexican restaurant, just a classic young first gig. And so I could, playing the guitar, I could get around a little bit, but I was really stuck on the first 4 or 5 frets, playing open string kind of bluegrass style. And I could solo up a little bit on the higher strings pentatonically, but I was still struggling with how to play over chord changes. And okay, I could hear, man, you need to learn how to play over these changes, but I couldn't figure it out. I was just learning at that point. And so the video that I learned back then, we were watching all the VHS tapes, right?
Yeah,
Tony
yeah.
Wright, Sam Bush mandolin, Danny Gatton. I know we have that in common, where I learned a lot off that first video he did.
Yeah.
And kind of learned, the way of kind of, I don't know any, music theory or anything like that, so to speak, but kind of learned, okay, if you're playing in an A dominant 7, you can kind of look at E minor 7 and some other, G major 7 to get you out of the box. It's kind of like he said, his hillbilly jazz way of looking at playing the guitar.
Right.
That really changed my life. But before that was Pat Flynn, who played guitar with Newgrass Revival. He's a great guitar player and songwriter here from California, but been in Nashville for a long time. His video preached what we now call the caged system. And so he said, look, if you really want to learn your way up the neck comfortably on the guitar, you have to learn all your major chord shapes and the scales and arpeggios around them. And so when I dug into that and really got into that, that changed my whole life, because I kind of saw it then around the chords and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then, okay, so then you're working hard. I mean, you probably played what? Hours and hours every day, like all of us did.
Hours and hours a day. Yeah, I wasn't really great in school. I skipped a lot of school, and I quit high school 2 weeks into the 10th grade. Me and my buddy just walked out the front door.
Wow.
And I never went to college, never went back to high school. I got a GED floating around here somewhere. I don't even know where it is. But
Right.
anyway, I wasn't really good. So yeah, I played a lot of music, during the day and after school and stuff,
Yeah. And you're playing gigs you said at the Mexican restaurant. You're starting to get more gigs. When does it become like, you need to start thinking about how to actually make a living, like, or maybe make the decision to move to Nashville? When do you start having those thoughts?
Well, it was funny because, like I said earlier, I didn't have a plan. I mean, nobody in my family was telling me that I needed to do anything. They definitely weren't telling me I needed to go to college or get a real job. They saw that I had a little knack for music, and they were just letting me run with it, and trying to be as supportive, and were as supportive as they possibly could, which, I mean, I owe everything to them. They're great family, great parents. And so what I always say is, as my bills started coming in, like what are your first bills when you're a teenager, like maybe your car insurance,
Yep.
your car payment, stuff like that. As those bills started coming in, my work was increasing at the same time. So when it was time to pay rent for the first time, I was making enough to where I could do it. I started playing on the Gulf Coast down there with a couple different guys. One of them had a real tight connection to Nashville that brought me here for the first time in the late 90s to do some records. Met a bunch of people then. And then, but back then we were working 7 nights a week and twice on Sunday. I mean, there was one stretch of time down there where I did like 36 gigs in 25 days or something. We were just, and I'd go home at 17 or 18 years old and stuff a wad of cash in my sock drawer.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it, and so I moved to Nashville in 2002.
Okay. Same year I moved to LA. Exact same.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah. And so that was it. So then I started playing downtown. I went down and hung out in the doorway and annoyed those guys every weekend for a month or two, until Don finally cracked and said, okay, come sit in on Sunday. They never let anybody sit in. And so I did, and then Johnny was leaving, and he said, man, you can have this gig if you want it. Everybody in Nashville has always said the same thing to me. You can have this gig if you want it. It was never like, hey, we'd love to have you play with us. It was like, hey, the gig's yours if you want it.
Right. Man, well, it's funny, you're describing playing that many days in a week and that many days in a row. I think that's the other part that gets overlooked now because number one, it's not available to most kids coming up to gig as much as we did at such a young age when everything makes such a big difference. You're growing leaps and bounds literally by the week, you know. And people ask me all the time, like, where do you get, you know, the stamina or all the vocabulary to solo for 2 hours a night or 3 hours a night? That's
Yeah.
directly where it comes from. All those gigs, yeah, 100%. It's had to be the same for you, right?
100%. And trying gear and trying guitars and trying amps and going to your local music store and doing all the things that, I mean, I'm not a gear guy really at all now. I'm kind of, just I'm the worst at that stuff. But back then you're just trying stuff. You're playing 4 hours a night, on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or all week long. And yeah, you're just trying stuff. You're working out stuff at home, hopefully, and then I would always try to learn stuff. I do remember this actually. Back then, I would always try to learn something. Like if I was, checking out the Danny Gatton video or something, I'd try to learn something that I could use that night at the
Oh yeah,
gig.
dude, 100%. Always. It was always, how quick can I get this on stage? Because
Right,
the quicker I played it on stage, then it became an actual thing in my toolbox right
right.
away.
Yeah, it wasn't, and I still don't do this to this day. I should, but it wasn't sitting down and learning an entire Wes Montgomery solo or something
Right.
like that. It was, hey man, I didn't want to overwhelm myself. If I could pick, one little cool idea that I liked the most out of something, I would put that in my toolbox, you know?
But by doing that, you were learning the reason behind the lick as opposed to just transcribing somebody's solo. I always thought like when you took a lick and and somebody plays something like whatever and lands those flat fifths all the time.
Right,
It wasn't the lick that I stole. It was the idea of, oh, I'm going to highlight the fuck out of that flatted fifth,
right.
and now that's a new thing. It's a sound that I can hear and draw on anytime. And that was the way I approached everything when I was stealing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing that was interesting and that I was really fortunate to have was the Floribama Lounge down there. Literally, on half the club was in Florida, half was in Alabama. They had a thing down there, and they still do it. I think it's every November for about 13 or 14 days, and it's called the Frank Brown International Songwriter Festival.
Uh,
And that was my like vein to guys in Nashville. So I was this kid down there in my hometown. My dad would take me out to the Bama. I was getting to know everybody and blues bands, and then the songwriter guys, and all the kind of stuff in between. And so it was a cool place because they had music, on 3 different stages. It was kind of like the Broadway thing, music every day, all day long, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And so you could go out there any time and hear music. And it was a classic thing. You had your hot shot local blues guy,
yeah.
and then your guys that they'd show me some ropes and stuff, tell me not to drink too much, and send me on my way. And so but the Frank Brown Songwriters Festival, we had all these guys coming down from Nashville, like Hank Cochran, Red Lane, Mickey Newberry, Gove Scrivener, Carl Jackson. I mean, all these like really, really heavy duty songwriters, legends, and we would end up at the beach house after, till 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, watching the sun come up. And I'd be at the table, with these guys, and I'd be playing my mandolin and stuff, just kind of sitting in and learning the ropes. And these guys instilled in me and scared me to death. They said, look, man, you're playing nice, but don't play on the vocals. When we're singing, don't play anything. Learn to play in between the vocals. And that was such a Nashville thing. And when you get to Nashville, it's such a song town that you're just, after being here for so long, that those things are just they become part of you, and they're in your blood. I mean, it's so much about the song. And man, when you hear people playing in other places, and I'm not talking about LA or New York where there's, amazing musicians, but you go to, if you're on the road and you stumble into a place and you're hearing a local band, you just realize that, man, there's a whole different way that is instilled in you in these places where you're playing songs,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
and that was
Dude,
a good lesson to learn.
that's yeah. I mean, just play around the vocals can carry you far.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Learn how to support, you know? I mean, so
Yeah.
many guys forget it's a job too. Like, yeah, you want to be the baddest, you want to be, you know, special, but
Mhm.
most of the time you're doing a job where you're supporting somebody or you're backing somebody up.
Yeah,
And
and
I mean,
what they miss is if you're doing that and you're really good at it, then you are special and you are a badass, you
yeah,
know?
exactly. Also, did you ever toss any mullets at the Floribama?
You know, I only did that about one, I think maybe one time I actually threw a mullet. God, man, what a crazy place to grow up. But man, so throwing it to you for a second, you're also from Florida, but you're from real Florida. I'm from like South Alabama, Florida.
Well, I don't know if I'm from real Florida either. I'm from South Florida, Miami, Fort Lauderdale area.
Oh,
It's
wow,
like
that's the thing.
it's like the middle of Florida is the most Florida, I guess. When everybody makes the Florida jokes, it's all the long part, you know. But yeah, I grew up down in South Florida, and I moved to LA in 2002. Yeah,
Wow, and you've been out there ever since.
yeah. So 18 years out here in
Wow.
LA. Same for you. I was 22 when I moved out here.
Yeah, man. I keep telling people 20 years, I need to realize it's only 18.
Yeah. Dude, okay, you're in Nashville, you're playing with Don, you're starting to get called for sessions, I'm assuming, and doing cool stuff during the day. When did you feel like, you know, you had found your footing there and you were a part of the scene, you were a real working musician?
Well, I'll say this without, hopefully this doesn't sound, I'm, arrogant or anything, but I will say that if you play in Don's band, and back then Broadway was different. I mean, we all knew each other down there. It wasn't like it is today. It's literally, hillbilly Hollywood, Nash
Yeah.
Vegas now. I mean, it's crazy down there, and nobody knows each other, and they're all young and playing 80s rock and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
back then it was like you could go into, 9 out of 10 bars down there and hear pedal steel, fiddle, great country music, And so if you played with Don and you were the guitar player, you were instantly like the new dude on the street, the gunslinger, and you're like
Mhm.
instant street cred, and the word spread, and it was just the best thing that could have ever happened to me here. And so I will say the thing that I would have changed if I could anything was that the thing about playing with Don for 4 years here was I kind of got pigeonholed as a country guitar player, which we don't want to be none of us want to be pigeonholed because as musicians we want to feel like we can do everything really good.
Mhm.
The reality is that's not true. I can't do everything great, and you don't realize that until you get a little older and you can tell the difference between, okay, I might be able to fake a little jazz, but you go hear a real jazz player and it's a totally different ball game. And so
Yeah.
we can, I can cop the flavor of a couple things, but I'm not going to be able to do certain things as good as other people, and vice versa. That's why we're all able to work. But other than that, I mean, it was awesome. I mean, my chops were the best that they've probably ever been as far as, technical, physical ability back then, because we played 4 hours a night, 4 nights a week,
Yeah. Wow.
without a break. I didn't leave the bandstand for 4 hours. And so, it was just, and some of those tempos were just blazing.
Talk about building stamina, you know,
It
that's
really
that's
built stamina.
yeah.
Yeah, and luckily I was ready for that gig because down on the Gulf Coast we had a band that we were playing, some blues and swing and jazz, country kind of stuff, train beats and stuff, and we were playing 4 hours a night down there too, and outside in August on the Gulf Coast, which really will make you strong. So I was ready for the gig pretty much, but I really learned how to hone in on playing country music on that gig, shuffles
Mhm.
and different stuff. Really kind of getting into that, which I still love real country music. I mean, I don't necessarily love the redneck kind of element that kind of is always there with it, but I do love like great old country shuffles, and
Oh
man,
yeah.
some of that stuff just has a lot of, so to me some of that stuff is like listening to some great old blues.
Absolutely, 100%, especially going back to the oldest country stuff. There's direct parallels between so much of that stuff, you know.
Right,
It's just who was writing it and who was singing it. But they,
right.
they had a lot of shared experiences, mostly in struggle, you know?
Yeah,
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 totally.
100%.
When you listen to some of those early like swinging doors and stuff like that from Merle Haggard, Ralph Mooney and those guys, they're playing the blues.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And listen to Jimmy Rogers and stuff
Right.
like that. It's like, come on, you know. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's right
it's
there.
unbelievable, dude.
Yeah.
So
So that was kind of the springboard was the Don gig, and then during that time, well, the thing that was cool about Don was, he knew I was new to town, and he liked me because he knew I liked the blues. He's from Tyler, Texas. He's a blues guy at heart.
right.
And so when I sat in with those guys, I brought like a hollow body guitar. I didn't even bring a Telecaster. Well, he liked that. And so, but so he would let me, if I ever started touring with, like, I started touring with Patty Loveless. And then when that ended, I started playing with Jerry Douglas. Well, I was still playing with Don during that time. So he would always let me, if I went out of town for a couple of weeks, when I got back, he'd always let me come back down to Roberts and play.
Right.
It was unusual for him because he was kind of a stickler for that kind of stuff. But anyway, everything started kind of ramping up from there.
And when you got the Jerry Douglas gig, I'm assuming that was super exciting because you'd probably listen to him all your childhood there. I knowing the stuff that you came up listening to. What was that
Absolutely.
like the first time you sat down and played with him?
It was funny because when I was listening to records with my uncle, every time it became a joke in the household because every time we heard the dobro, we'd just go, "Oh, I wonder who that is," because it's always
Yeah.
Jerry.
Yeah, of course.
So anyway, so I'll never forget where I was. I was down at Todd Sharp, who's a great friend and a great
Yeah.
musician and writer and everything in his own right, and a great amp builder and our number one amp tech here in town. I was down in Franklin at his old amp shop at his house in his garage, and I was getting something done, and the phone rings, and I didn't recognize the number. And I'm the opposite of everybody else. I always answer the numbers I don't recognize because I figure it's some random new work or something.
That's a gig. Yeah, same. I'm the same.
Yeah,
That's always a gig. Yeah.
right. It's always a gig, something new, right? So I pick up the phone, and he goes, "Hey, is this Guthrie?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "This is Jerry Douglas." I said, "Hey, wow." I said, "How you doing, man?" He goes, "Well, I got your number from Sam Bush. We had done a festival together, and I've known Sam since I was 6 or 7 years old because my dad promoted Newgrass Revival down to Pensacola a couple times because they would never tour in that area, and we were big fans. And uh, so anyway, Jerry's on the other end of the phone, and he goes, "Hey, would you be interested in playing some guitar with me in my band?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so he goes, "Okay." He goes, "Look, I'm going to send you some songs, learn a few of these tunes, and then we'll get you over to the house, to the studio, and we'll do a little rehearsal / audition, whatever you want to call it." And I was just like, another life changer. This is the thing about now. Of course, I was unbelievably knocked out by this. I mean,
Yeah.
one of my all-time heroes. And so I ended up getting the gig. He ends up saying, "Hey, this gig's yours if you want it." That's like I said.
Right.
So I was blown away, and we ended up going out and doing a bunch of crazy stuff, as anyone can imagine. I mean, it was awesome. And I learned a lot from Jerry. The thing I learned from Jerry was when he would play with Alison Krauss and some of these, like, just, if you haven't heard Jerry, he's got a huge catalog of his own records that are amazing, but he's also backed up Alison Krauss for a long time. And you can hear some of the most, I don't know if anybody on the planet can back up a singer the way Jerry can.
Yeah.
It's so toneful and so amazing, and it's just so perfect. It'll put chills on your arms. But when we were with his band, that was his opportunity to stretch out and push himself. And so
Mhm.
the thing I learned about Jerry is when you're in that situation of your own band and you're playing some music that's going to push you a little bit, it's different than playing with Patty where I'm backing up a vocalist or something like that. That's a lesson in restraint and taste. And then the other thing is your opportunity to get the chance to blow and push yourself. But what I learned from Jerry over all those years was it's okay to step out and take some chances. And if you make a mistake, nobody's going to get hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's an important point. I mean, the more you're pushing yourself, it's okay. I mean, and failure, whatever, and not even, we're not talking about life or death, but you make a mistake, there's no greater motivator because if you fuck something up one time, at least me, I know that will never happen again. That mistake will never happen again.
Right. Right.
Yes.
And we want to go hear somebody. I mean, I'm sure you're the same way. If we go hear one of our heroes, we want to hear them stepping out and pushing themselves and not playing it safe. Playing
Right.
it safe is for backing up the singer.
Yep. Yeah. You want to hear somebody going for it,
Yeah.
not dangerously, but at least like, putting their all into it and following what they're hearing. That's what
Right.
improvisation is all about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the 10 questions.
All right.
All right. So here's the 10 questions I've been asking everybody. You could play if you want or not play, whatever. It's up to you. Number one, when you started learning and playing, what was the first thing that when you learned it, like it could be a lick, a song, whatever, but when you figured it out, you got that feeling of like, oh my God, I did it. And it set that hook like forever. Like you can't believe you learned this and it's the greatest thing ever.
It was probably, I'm actually going to grab my acoustic guitar here.
All right.
It was probably something that I learned off one of the Tony Rice videos, because that was like, back as a kid being a bluegrass player, it was like, man, if you could pull off something like one of his licks, you were like the cool kid at the campfire. And so, so let's see. Okay, I'm pretty in tune. So it's probably something like his famous lick is kind of like, you know, uh, uh, so some of those licks that I finally figured out, Church Street Blues. Let's see. Like those first couple licks were in G, and then this is in D. It was like just so I'm not sure of any specific lick, but it was that some of those licks and kind of that vocabulary that I finally started figuring some stuff out note for note, and I could make it sound like I was actually playing over the right chord.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's such a fun style. I could see like the second you like nail one of those things with an open string in it, it's just
Hmm.
like as a kid, you're like, this is the coolest thing ever,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So then part and parcel to that is what is the first solo that you ever learned note for note?
Oh God, that's a tough one.
Or maybe just the one that stands out the most that you learned that solo note for note. You had to learn it. It made an impression.
Oh man. Oh, that's a tough one. Because I didn't do a whole lot of that back then, but um, it was probably something in the bluegrass vein.
Yeah.
Man, I'm sorry I don't have a more definitive answer for
No,
you.
everybody's got a different
Um,
thing. I mean, it's funny for me. It was like I don't know if it was BB King. It was probably Live at the Regal, but also one that I vividly remember learning note for note as a little kid was AC/DC. You Shook Me All Night Long. Like I don't know
oh
why,
wow.
but I learned that solo note for note. When I was probably 8 years old or something like that. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
To answer that without totally flaking out on that question, in the bluegrass world, it's all about learning these fiddle tunes and stuff.
hmm
So I probably learned a lot of those before I learned a specific solo.
uh-huh.
And then one solo I did learn when I was younger was we had this guy down there that turned me on to the jump blues stuff, and I did learn Hollywood Fats "Rock This House."
Haha, yeah, yeah.
And so, but that was so long ago, man. I'd have to go relearn that solo, but that was one of them for sure.
That's cool that someone hipped you to Hollywood Fats. That means that guy knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, he did. He was a harmonica player down there that was a painter on this, he was a painter and just a crazy dude. But he did turn me on to all those guys who I would have never known about until probably I moved up here.
Yeah, yeah. So for all you who don't know Hollywood Fats, go look him up. West Coast swing blues guitar player, legend.
Yeah,
Hollywood
man.
Fats and the Blue Flames. All right. What's the first thing you play every time you pick up a guitar? Is there something that your hands just go there automatically? I know I've got a little thing like that. Is there something you've got? Or like when you're trying out a guitar, what do you play so you can hear it? It's you're comfortable.
Okay, it's funny you say that. So what I'm trying to do now is not do that. I'm trying so hard to not go where my hands just want to go automatically, but of course they do. And if I'm playing, if I'm trying a guitar out, if I'm trying an acoustic guitar out in the store, I'll usually from coming from so much bluegrass, you know, I'll usually play like a big G chord,
Yeah.
and then I'll play like a drop D chord, and then I might play something up the neck like an open E chord to make sure the guitar is intonating properly. But on the electric, I don't know, man. I'm trying to get away from playing, you know, licks as much as, and that sounds so stupid because that's really what we're all trying to do. But I really have been trying to make a conscious effort of playing just kind of what I'm feeling at the moment.
Yep.
And a lot of times lately it's been, I mean, it changes every day. I think we all wake up every day kind of wanting to hear something different. It might be, one day we might want to hear some songs, and the other day we might want to hear somebody like Schofield or Osnoy or
Yeah.
somebody just kind of, really kind of challenging our ear a little bit. But I'll tell you, I have been digging playing out of the key of B a lot because we get all these open strings. Sorry, I didn't mean to play that, but extra charge for mistakes. But I've been getting into that mode a little bit where, just trying to play something that has some feeling to it,
Nice. Well, then that leads to this question. Maybe it's B then right now, but what key or style or song do you hear in your head all day? Like, do you have a narration? When I'm walking around, when I'm cooking, even when I'm talking to you, I'm normally hearing a shuffle in my head, and I'm hearing something swing, and I'm hearing somebody go. I can't help it. I've got this improv that's going in my head 24 hours a day. Is there stuff like that that comes and goes in your head all the time?
Yeah, that's another funny thing, man. This is really weird, but I'm going to be honest with you. Of all the music that I could get stuck in my head, I get the worst songs on the planet stuck in my head. Where I'll be in the shower or something, and I'll get just the worst stuff that's ever been recorded. And for some reason, I'll think of it, and I'm like, why, of all the stuff in the world, why is that song coming up?
Huh.
It's really weird, man. I don't know what it is, but it happens.
You mean like the Pina Colada song or Afternoon Delight or something? What are we talking here?
I mean, stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. It's really crazy, but I don't know. I don't have stuff running through my head all the time. Mainly, I'm normally what's going through my head is the things that I need to get done that day that I'm not getting done, or me telling myself I need to go spend 5 hours playing the guitar so I don't make a bunch of mistakes like I just did. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Okay, all right.
But B is a fun key. I like B and F sharp a lot,
Yeah, I like F sharp with that open E for the flat seven. I love that.
Yeah. I like that stuff. I like drop D. I like drop D a lot,
Yeah. Nice.
I don't like the flat keys. I'm not good with E flat, A flat.
B flat is the key that I'm hearing in my head all the time, but I think that's because I listened to so much Charlie Parker in my life that it was just built into my head. I don't know why,
Yeah, that's good. B flat's not as bad as A flat and E flat and those other ones, man.
It's funny. I did a True Fire thing recently, a lesson, and it was like for a group of players, and I purposely made the lesson in A flat because I knew it was going to be all guys who never play in flat keys ever. And they were like, "Can we just do the lesson in A?" And I was like, "No, like there's no difference. Just play."
Right. Yeah.
Anyways, all right. When did you feel like you started to find your voice on the guitar? Was there a moment where you figured something out or kind of something clicked and you realized, "Oh, I should go further down this path because this sounds like me. I'm starting to find something here."
Yeah, man, that's another hard question. I think when I stopped trying so hard. you know?
Yeah,
I
that
think when
makes
I
sense.
I think when I just realized, like, look, man, if you're finally at the point where you kind of know what to play on the song that you're given to play on, and you can kind of discern whether, just being tasteful and knowing, like, okay, this is a R&B song. I'm going to really enjoy playing something that fits this song, and it's going to have our voice in there somewhere, but we still have to kind of play to the song. I'm not going to play a bunch of steel guitar licks on an R&B song unless for some reason it might be appropriate in one little spot or something. And so I kind of, like you, man, kind of just embraced being influenced by a bunch of different kinds of music. And I think that's what it is. I always tell students, like, look, if you can listen to as much music as you can and try to learn the things that you like from that music. Don't go out and learn a bunch of music you don't like because somebody told you you had to.
Yeah,
And like, as guitar players, we're all going to agree on like a Mount Rushmore of guys that were
sure.
influential. Like, if it's, it could be BB King, Jimi Hendrix, Robert, well, who's the guy from Led Zeppelin? Jimmy
Jimmy
Page.
Page. Yeah.
Whatever your Mount Rushmore of guys is, chances are there's a huge percentage of us guitar players. Not, I'm probably the worst of them because I didn't learn any of those cover songs early on, but like, we're gonna have guys we agree on: David Gilmour, Mark Knopfler,
Sure.
pinnacle guys. And then as your family tree of influences gets more and more diverse for all of us individually, that's when your true voice can kind of come out, I think, because as those stems grow down here to all these different things, like, maybe you get into some real specific country music or steel guitar or fiddle or Cuban music where you're listening to the trace, or you're learning some piano stuff, or different influences from different music and different African stuff, whatever, Brazilian you get into, the blues, all these things start trickling down. Well, then we might start disagreeing on stuff that you like or don't like, and that's what kind of separates us all as individuals. If we all just learn Stevie Ray Vaughan solos, then we're all going to sound the same.
Absolutely.
I could be wrong, but that's my theory.
Interesting. All right. What's your biggest weakness on the guitar? Mine is not quite what you were doing earlier, but it's an acoustic guitar related. It's like playing finger picked stuff, intricate acoustic guitar parts, like on a session under a
Mhm.
magnifying glass. That's kryptonite to me. What's
That's
yours?
that's so hard to do.
Yeah.
Mine is, I'll say this. Mine is theory, and this kind of relates to theory, but knowing every note on the fingerboard. I don't
Really?
know. I don't know every note on the fingerboard. I mean, I could find out what they are if I concentrated, but if you just pointed to that note, I don't know what that is right off the bat.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. See, to me, it's not holding you back, so it's like, who cares?
That's one of a long list.
Well, but man, that's such the great thing about, the individuality of this instrument. We all have things that make us us and things that we do strong and things that we don't do strong. And it's like you learn along the way to either be okay with it, or if it really fucking bothers you, you do something about it and
Right,
you work on that. And that's what it's all, either you do it or you don't.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
So obviously, I don't want to play like James Taylor or Tommy Emmanuel or whatever. I can't. So
yeah,
it's not that important to me. Otherwise, I would have gotten better at it. Well,
yeah, exactly. That's what I agree too, man. We're gonna excel at the things that we really want to be able to do.
yeah. Yeah. Who's a huge influence on you or your playing that people would be really surprised to hear?
Oh God. Um, Maybe somebody like David Gilmour,
Yeah.
because I'm not much of a classic rock dude. I mean, I just don't listen to it.
Hmm.
But David Gilmour, Mark Knopfler, that's not a surprise. Everybody knows that. But
Yeah.
but I just love the way those guys play, real melodically and soulful and toneful.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I had a more interesting answer. I really like, even though I can't play one single thing he's ever played, I do love John Scofield, but that's a
Yeah.
pretty common
Yeah.
one. We
Same.
all we all like him. I mean, good Lord,
Yeah. Yeah. Same.
amazing. You know who I listen to? My buddy Doug Belote, who he lives in New Orleans. We spent a lot of time together while I was down there, and he hit me to a record by Lenny Stern. She's doing all this African stuff now, and there's a record that she's got out. I think it might be her latest one, but it's a record she did. It's really African, heavy African influenced. And man, she plays some beautiful guitar and stuff on there, some beautiful melodies and really cool stuff.
Nice. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right. All right. Cool. Well, yeah, I can see how David Gilmour. Some people would know that that would be an influence on you. I hear it though, and certainly I understand why. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, dude. Would you rather have a good guitar and a shitty amp, or would you rather have a great amp and a crappy guitar?
Oh God, that's a really good question. So great guitar, shitty amp.
Yeah, or vice versa.
Man, I think I'd rather have a great amp and a really shitty guitar.
I'm with you 100%, but not everybody's on that same page. It's been
Well, because
split.
at least if you were in the heat of battle, you'd be able to hear it.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a great question.
I know I can personally be more comfortable with a good amp and whatever guitar as
Yeah.
opposed to you can give me the best guitar in the world and I have to play through a crate or something. I'm going to have a shitty gig.
Well, to me, that would be like having a really awesome car with a sewing machine engine in it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
you got no horsepower.
But some guys feel the other way. They need the comfort in their hands more than they need anything else. So as long as it plays the way they need it to play, it doesn't even matter what it sounds like. I'm 100% the opposite.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I need that nice fat clean headroom.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, cool, man. All right. All right. Well, we're together on that one. All right. Dude, what keeps you motivated to keep like learning new stuff every day and to be better? I'm always curious like what keeps guys moving forward because we all know and have grown up around guys who, were our heroes, 20 years ago and they sound exactly the same now. And then we all know the guys that we love who sound different every 6 months because you hear this work that they're putting in. What keeps you pushing like that? Because I hear it in you all the time, dude. Every time a few months go by and I don't hear you play, and then I hear you play again, you got something new.
Oh man, thanks for saying that. That makes me feel better. Man, I will say this. So Nashville is a place where it's made up of a bunch of people that were the big fish in the small ponds of their little hometowns all over the world, right? And so when those guys all, when their family or friends tell them, man, you're really good, you should think about moving to Nashville. Well, some of them do. And they come here and then now they're big fish in a really big pond. And so it continues to keep raising the bar. I mean, even after being here for going on 20 years, 18 years, I've got people here that I'll be able to learn from just, in Nashville for the rest of my life. And, guys like Jack Pearson and Tom Bukovac and Pat Burgessson and all these guys they're my friends now, but I mean, I could go take a lesson from Pat that would, I would be working on for the rest of my life. And so that's what does it here for me is being in this kind of world of just, a bunch of badass guitar players and musicians. I'm getting more where I'm getting away from just guitar and starting to just say musicians because, we have this thing of the guitar is such a, it's such our thing, but just all the great musicians that live here. And when you go in to work with those guys in the studio or on a gig, man, you can't let your guard down or somebody's going to come in and man, they'll mess you up,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, so that's what does it for me. And still being excited and inspired about music. I still love to listen to all the old records that I've been listening to forever. And I wish I knew how to find all this cool music that everybody else finds. I'm just terrible at it. I get on all these different platforms to find music and I just can't find it. And then I'll get in the car with somebody that's not musically inclined at all. And they've got like a playlist of all these really hip, new, current songs. I go, where do you find this stuff? I don't know. Yeah. But I like it all, man. I like it all. I like some pop music, but the thing about country, the pop country stuff is if I want to hear like real pop music, I'd rather hear something from LA or New York that's at least trying to be what it is,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
But
Yeah.
I even get inspired by some of that stuff, you know?
I do too. I mean, and for me, a lot of it, the inspiration comes more on a production side. Like it'll
Right.
inspire me to think about things differently, come up with parts differently, come up with sounds differently. And
Yeah.
I try to listen to music that way in general. So if it's a music that I'm naturally not inclined to enjoy, then I will listen to it in the headspace of, you know what, let me find something that is cool about this. And it may
Right.
be something as simple as the way the snare drum sounds or whatever. Who
Right.
knows? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, dude. So where do you see yourself heading in 5 years? Is there a goal? Is there something you're trying to reach to, or is it just to keep on keeping on, or you got something in mind, somewhere you want to be?
God, man, I wish I knew. And I kind of do. I mean, again, I even now, I still really don't have a plan for anything. I just try to go with what works. I mean, all this education stuff I've been doing recently, which has become a big part of my income stream. I didn't set out to be a guitar teacher by any means. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely not.
I don't dislike it. I enjoy doing it. And it's challenging. I think it's made me a better musician. I think it's, I've definitely become a better teacher. I feel like, in the past 5 or 6 years, um, but like you said earlier on, was very important. It's about having 5 or 6 things going at all times to keep from getting burned out on just one of them.
Yep.
And so the pandemic has limited us to doing things in front of in front of a camera or our iPhone. And man, I need that balance of, okay, I can do lessons and stuff for a couple days and do some artist work stuff, but then man, I need to be able to jump out and go play a live gig or do a session or write a song or do something just to keep it all kind of going. But I'd like to keep doing what I've been doing before the pandemic, which is a little bit of everything. Some
Yeah.
touring with John Oates, some session stuff. Play a gig at Rudy's Jazz Club, and then play at the Station Inn and play some country stuff the next night or whatever. And that really keeps me happy and fulfilled as a musician and a person. But uh, when all this stuff hopefully gets back to normal or better than normal, I would just like to. I always say I want to keep doing the same things I'm doing, but just keep them growing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you know that's about it. One thing that I haven't done because of the financial aspects of it is I wish I would have started getting out and doing some of my own music, in little, places outside of Nashville, little tours and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I'm so far behind the 8 ball on that. It's ridiculous. And at this point, I would probably have to just lose money to do it.
Well, dude, and that's, you're talking to somebody who's done it for 10 years now again,
Right.
and it is mostly a losing proposition, but it's a labor of love. So it's like I'm always balancing how much I'm willing to give up towards doing my thing all the time versus
Right.
how do I pay my bills?
Right.
So yeah, it is. It's a constant balance act. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, kudos to you for getting out there and doing it, man. I mean, that's,
Dude, it's a difficult thing to be out there. Going to Europe, dude. I'm going all the time and playing with different musicians every time, and
mhm,
local musicians. Different. There's a lot of work involved that has nothing to do with music, just to
right.
sometimes break even. So it's got to be because you want to do it. That's for sure.
Right. And these days, by doing that, some of you know, your other things that you're doing though are probably, since you're getting your name out there more and more by touring, you're seeing those incomes probably coming in on other aspects. You know what I mean? It's kind of probably balancing out at some point. I know
Oh, they
when I started.
definitely feed each other. One hand washes the other. Absolutely.
Right, right. I say a rising tide floats all boats. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
hopefully
Exactly.
it,
As long as you're invested in yourself, then
right.
you're doing the right thing. It may pay off in the area that you didn't think was where you wanted it to pay off, but it's
Right.
still paying off, so it's not so bad.
Right, and that's the thing too about a lot of young guys have moved to Nashville that have probably moved out because of all this stuff here with, the COVID thing. But I always tell them, man, like, look, if you really want to make a living in the music industry, uh, you can't. You have to maybe start thinking a little bit more entrepreneurially. You have to think about, diversifying as much as you can, as much as you're comfortable with, and maybe even a little bit out of your comfort zone. We got to push ourselves to do some things we don't like to do. But
Yep.
that being said, you have to develop some ownership in something, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, you do. You have to cut, that's part of being a musician anyways. It's very difficult to do this unless you're all the way into it. Like,
Right.
if you're doing little fallback plans and have other jobs that aren't music related, then you're normally not going to succeed at doing this because it takes every ounce of effort you have just
Yeah.
to make it work in any way when you do
Right.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Somebody said the other day, and I might even save the little quote or whatever, but it said, music is not a hobby. Coin collecting is a hobby. This is our life, you know?
yeah, 100%, 100%. And you get that, we've all been in that situation at the store when you meet a friend of a friend. They say, "What do you do for a living?" "Oh, I'm a guitar player." "Oh, yeah, but what's your job?" Or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It's so
exactly.
funny how it's become such a stereotype when, I mean, there's a lot of people that are doing really well, you know?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But again, like you said, I never thought I'd be making most of my living from instructional material and gear that I put my name on and
Hmm.
records that I produce and so many things that have nothing to do with my actual music. Now they're
Yeah.
related to it and people maybe buy them because they know my music or whatever, but the actual things that are the money's coming in have none of my music involved in them in any way. So it's like it's a weird thing, it's very weird.
Yeah, I think guys like us though, man, we're in it for the right reasons, and we've always kind of I've always kind of stuck to my guns as far as music that I wanted to play and music I didn't want to play. And man, that if you come to a place like Nashville or LA and you start chasing the guy that's the most successful and you try to sound like him, and
Oh yeah.
you talked about that earlier, you're buying all the same gear this guy has. It's like, no, that guy's already doing that guy better than anybody's ever going to do it. If you just stick to your guns, you're going to end up in the right place. But if you start chasing a bunch of stuff for the
Yep.
wrong reasons, you're going to end up high and dry at some point,
You find that out quick. I'm sure you did when you got there. When I got here and I became friends with Landau, and it was like, I started doing sessions, I realized real quick I was never going to be Michael Landau
Yeah.
or, any of those guys. And it was better for me to almost go more all in on what makes me me, because at
Right.
least those calls were gratifying, the ones that I was getting for that. And you know what? When you did that, then the amount of calls start to go up anyways, because you
Right.
start to get a reputation for that.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, dude, thank you so much. And for members, we're going to have a little extra video where called Turn Two. If you've seen any of the other ones, you'll know it. Where we're going to show you two licks. But dude, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And like I said,
Oh,
dude,
man.
you're a huge inspiration, man. I love your playing.
Well, man, same to you, Josh. I really appreciate it. And some point some point I'll have to get on here and redeem myself from all those mistakes I made earlier. But
Ah, come on.
but thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. I love this stuff, especially during these times.
Yeah, man. And in the description, there'll be links to all things Guthrie Trapp. So please, if you're not familiar, go pick up some music, go to Guthrie's YouTube channel, take a lesson, do anything you can, because this dude is fantastic. All right. And for members,
Thanks, man.
hang on. We'll be right back.
All right.